welcome to the Performance Lab powered by Sports One. Our guest today was a kicker at LSU where he played in the 2012 National Championship game. He finished his college career as a kicker at Rice University. He is the founder of Simple Kicking Solutions in Dallas, Texas, which is a football innovation lab creating products and technology to improve kickers, punters, and long snappers. Additionally, he developed an iPhone app that tracks field goals, punts, kickoffs, and long snaps. James Hairston, welcome to the Performance Lab.
Thank you, Mr. Webb.
Well, we appreciate your time, and we're very glad you could join us. We all know the life of a kicker can be a pretty lonely existence. If there's a position in football where you have to be a self-starter, this is clearly it. You've lived that life yourself. Tell us when you first started kicking and when you began to figure out you had a future at the position.
Yeah, that's right. It seems like when 7th, 8th graders are going up there for the first fall practice in August, the two positions they don't want are backup quarterback and kicker or long snapper, and it's in that order. So, starting at the bottom of the totem pole, it's a lonely world. It's dark, and it does require that self-starter mentality. And for me, I got into it because I was a soccer player, and I really enjoyed playing soccer my whole life. I've enjoyed kicking things. And when I got to Highland Park Middle School in 7th grade, I asked the coach, hey, they lined us all up, who can kick? I raised my hand, and I remember kicking a spiral punt, and they said, you are our starting punter and kicker. The same thing happened at Jesuit. When I was a freshman there, they lined us all up, and then I had a spiraling punt and a long kick. And there I was, coordinated the freshman starting kicker, and that was that.
Well, let's fast forward and talk about Simple Kicking Solutions. What do you do in that business?
So Simple Kicking began because of my own mishaps, the repeated mistakes that I had in my career and the things that I struggled with. These were all ideas that were in my head at my later part of my career at Jesuit, and then really at LSU, where I was trying to figure out how can I identify areas of improvement. And I just couldn't quite do it, although the thoughts were in my head. So Simple Kicking came from those thoughts, and what I'm doing is creating products. And I created the Pro Post, which we can talk about later. And like you had spoken about in the intro, I developed this iPhone app that tracks field goal kickers. I do it because there's nothing more fun for me to see than a youngster or a college or a pro make a kick where they intended the ball to go. There was an interview that Jordan Spieth had after one of his interviews or one of his rounds, and he said, I felt great. It was awesome to have the ball go where I wanted it to go. It's that feeling. That's my why I do it, to see kids, to see kickers and punters and long snappers do what they expect to do.
You mentioned the Pro Post. Where did that idea come from? What is it exactly, and what's the purpose there?
The purpose there on the Pro Post is to narrow the target. So Bob Rotella is a renowned golf psychologist, and he found that if I calibrate the minds of my clients to focus on the target, then that's where their energy and their focus will go on the golf course. So his clients are typically golfers. And in his book, Golf is Not a Game of Perfect, there's a whole chapter that talks about the target. Jack Nicklaus brings up in his interviews, I swung only thinking about the target. So with that in mind, I brought that to life for field goal kicking by creating the Pro Post, which narrowed the uprights. Consequently, it's creating visuals that kickers are taking into the games. And in 2019, as well as 2018, all the college teams, which I have about a dozen of them, that train on the Pro Post outperformed teams that did not at all ranges. And in the stats world, there is a threshold of a sample of amount of kicks that make that worth a statement, right? There's a worthy amount of kicks that have been taken, and we're over 100 kicks that are in the games to show these do create visuals that this does increase a field goal kicker's accuracy when it comes to the games which arguably matter the most.
So you have the college and high school field goal posts, which I think are the same width, and then you narrow up to the NFL. And if I'm wrong, please tell me. But is there a recommended width that you put the pro post, or do you tighten them up as much as you want to?
Yes, sir. So in high school, we'll talk in Texas because I believe this is all the case nationwide, but for Texas in the UIL, the mandatory width is 23 feet 6 inches. That is regulation Friday Night Lights field goal kicking. When you get to college, it changes to 18 feet 6 inches. So I may have misspoke earlier, but it is 23 feet and it goes down to 18 feet 6 inches for college and professional. College and professional have the same regulation.
Okay.
The problem that we run into in high school is top programs that repeatedly play in playoffs. Well, there's a point where those games are hosted at either college or professional venues. And typically they don't change the width of those uprights. So I recommend putting the pro post at 9 feet. Why? Because it's easy to measure 54 inches or 4.5 feet from the center of the goalpost either way. That's also what the Arena League has, and essentially it cuts the college and the professional by half. So you can make them as tight as you want. You can widen them as much as you want. The key to the pro post is that they look like the uprights and they feel like the uprights. What do I mean by that? Well, they're made out of aluminum. They're painted bright yellow or white, depending on your uprights that you have. And the second part that I think is really most important is they attach to the crossbar. Well, why is that important? Well, you don't see sticks that are attached to the ground other than the gooseneck or the center goalpost, the center post that's attached to the ground. So they were designed to give the look and the feel that you'll see in the games.
Kicking, we know, is such a mental game, and you've been on the field in the biggest college game on the biggest college stage. What were the mental tools that you used as a kicker to keep your head straight?
That's a really good question because I was a person that really struggled with the mental game. And the keys to success that I eventually found after seeing multiple sports psychologists, Dr. Lonnie Rosen at Michigan State, Randy Brown, who's the kicking coach for the Baltimore Ravens, and after my career, Martha Welch at Columbia University in New York, I found that what worked best for me, especially with the guy who's my special teams coordinator, Thomas McGahee, was that I'm playing with the house money. And what I mean by that is there are no really expectations of any result, that I'm loved and coach is proud of me or whatever I do. And because of that, it really gave me the ability to calm down, to swing freely, right? And I'll say it again, to swing freely to my target. And in that national championship game, I opened up the third quarter. It was a really cool feeling because I actually got to enjoy it. I got away from the technical aspect of the craft that clouded my mind for so many years and got into the feel of it. And I got to enjoy it and have a lot of fun. So that's what the mental aspect of it is like for these elite kickers. And after I've spoken with many of them, they have an uncanny ability to focus on what they want to do for that very short period of time, which is about 3 to 5 seconds.
In golf, we call it the shanks, the S word. Did you ever go through that as a kicker in your career?
Oh my gosh, it feels like I'm still going through it in post career, and what it feels like is it's frustrating and it's confusing because so many times I'm reviewing film, right? Gosh, film is the best teacher, right? That's what a lot of these coaches spend, a significant amount of their time and energy in these programs to devote lots of, capital and resources and money. But what I find that is the best way to calm the shanks is to let go of the result. There's so much pressure that the world already has that many people cave and the chaos that people crumble underneath. However, by kind of doing less and calming the mind, really eliminates the shanks. Sure, there are keys of areas of success and, that allow me to be on my game. And as long as I focus on those little small goals, such as small as taking a deep breath and really relaxing my body as I'm going in to kicking, or, making sure that my eyes are focused on the sweet spot, or maybe that I'm recalling those really positive feelings of the ball hitting my foot. That's how I got out of the shanks. And it was very, very difficult to get there because in my career at 18, 19, 20 years old, the propaganda of the film is working hard in the weight room and getting big and strong. Well, that applies to the field position players. Kicking is different. And so the harder I worked, I felt like the farther I was getting away from my intended desire, which was to hit a straight ball. And then when I got to like the prime old age of 21, 22 at LSU and Rice, I figured out that the less that I work and the harder that I want it, and I just kind of relax and do what I've already done, 10,000 times, that's when the results came. And it was so much fun.
So I'll tell you a little story. As a high school pitcher, I got what could best be described as the shanks or the yips pitching. And it lasted for a few weeks. I finally worked out of it, but it was very strange, James, in that it literally felt like somebody was grabbing my elbow about halfway through the pitch, and there was no telling where it was going. I mean, it was going fast, but it was going everywhere. And it was all mental. It was not physical, but yet I could feel it physically. When you have a problem as a kicker, do you feel it physically, or is it all in your mind?
That's a really good question, and something that really bonded with my uncle Michael Wilson. He was a pitcher and a long snapper at Rice University in the early 90s and ended up in the New York Yankees organization as a pitcher, and he dealt with the exact same thing. So really, as my uncle, he's also my godfather and my coach, he helped me with that exact same. That's a really interesting question that really, comes and hits close to home. I would say that at a certain level, right? So for 7th and 8th graders, the mental part of the game is probably 20%, right? The other 80% is you've got to learn how to, the technical part, and then physically you're growing and maturing at a rapid pace, which is important because your angles change. So the point being is 80% of the game happens from the physical perspective and the technical perspective in the 7th and 8th grade level. As you transition into high school, into college, and into pro, it actually shifts to 80% mental and more than likely 20% technical. And I bet it gets up to close to 90% mental as you're getting into the highest level. Well, why is that the case? Well, yeah, like you said, I felt like something was grabbing me. Well, when you get to a higher level, you realize that could be your mind playing a trick, or there's something that's going on between your ears that is not firing correctly. But what Martha Welch found in Columbia University, she's part of multiple studies in the nurture science program, but one in particular that describes what's going on is the autonomic nervous system, right? And so what she's found, actually a lot of this happens in your gut. So at that top level, what you're finding is there's some disconnection or misconnection that people are having actually that starts in their gut, where instead of it actually being in the mind. So the people that get to the elite level actually are calming themselves internally, not in the mind, but actually down in their guts. It's really incredible.
Okay, it's enough talking about the shanks. I'm sweating again. That was not a pleasant memory. We talked about the Pro Post. That's a mechanical tool, but you've created an app that leverages technology to help kickers and punters. Talk about that tool.
Yeah, absolutely. The app takes simple data. Where the ball started anywhere on the field, call it 27 yards on the left hash, to where the ball ended up for a field goal. Now, field goals are not just good or not good, and not all kicks are created equal either. So the app actually takes the precision of the ball, which measures the angle of where the ball ended up in relation to where we wanted it to go, which is right down the middle. As a result, we've been able to identify that kicks have tendencies associated with them. Not all kicks are really actually that good. There are some that are better than others. And after 700 downloads, what the youngsters and the pros are telling me is that they're actually getting better quicker because their brains are not able to retain the information of how they kick. They come off the field and mom, dad, or coach says, "How was the day?" "Well, it was okay." Well, now what the app identifies and is creating through the charts and the graphs and the stats is actually materializing what okay means or what good means or not so good by not just saying what your accuracy was, but also your precision, which measures where the ball ended up in relation to the center of the goalpost. And that is what the app does for field goals. And what it will do for punts is actually the same thing. Believe it or not, most punts are actually called to go either the left or to the right of the field. Then why do we see so many in the middle of the field? Well, it's a missed kick. It's a missed punt. So what I'm doing there is measuring the same that all coaches are measuring. The distance and the hang time and all that, jazz. And the cool part again is we're now able to have almost like a full-time kicking coach for these guys that are having the app, and it's really helping speeding the development timing up. And they're able to do it if they have access to a field or not. So that's the fun part of it. It's an app that's applicable to any punter or kicker or long snapper.
Obviously, the app is important to those kickers or punters or long snappers, but I would think it'd be a great tool for the coaches as well, who often aren't able to watch their kickers kick.
That's right. Coaches devote a significant amount of time. It's unbelievable how much they spend time at the college and pro level. In high school, they don't have the time, so they've got to go focus on the core parts of the game, which is offense, defense, and special teams is a core part of the game. It is something that is often overlooked because it's so misunderstood. So the coaches now are being able to learn at a faster pace. They're able to coach and be not kicking coaches, but they're able to be like a caddy in golf. They're able to go out there and say, "Hey, look, man, set a finger to the wind. It's like, you know what, we looked at your practice data this week, and this is what your tendencies are. Maybe we aim a little bit right because what we saw in practice this week is that you were kicking the ball left." I will tell you, having that freedom to swing freely and having a coach that is able to console you as not as a technical, guru, but as just your head football coach or your special teams coach, position coach, whatever it may be, it just opens up the floodgates for a whole nother realm to be focused on the kicking and the punting. It's really unbelievable. And these coaches are enjoying it and these kids are enjoying it. And that's really the most fun part for me.
I'm fascinated by what goes on in the head of a kicker. So let's go back to that a little bit. I'm assuming visualization was, seeing the ball go through the uprights was a valuable tool for you. Was there a mental process you had every time you went on the field? Did you have a ritual?
Yes, and that ritual changed over time. So for me, what I would do is kind of look at my elements first, right? Is there any kind of keys that, Tiger Stadium, it was very windy, and then we did have an American flag in the northeast corner of the field. And I always would try to tell myself, okay, what keys are out there? Because there's a lot of clues. And there's wind studies that I was doing of these stadiums. Another thing I would look at is the fireworks before the game, right? If you've got fireworks and you're a kicker, I don't want my kicker getting all pumped up in the pregame. Why? Because he's not able to really understand what the elements are. There's little keys like that can help. So number one, I look at that. Then I'm able to pick out my target. And by the way, this is James when he's on his good mindset, not when James is all up in his head. So after you kind of get an idea of the elements, then you're able to say, okay, where's my target? For me, I would choose a target, 2 balls right of center to give me that freedom that if I overswing, it'll still be good. So then I pick my target. After that, I take my steps. I make sure I focus on my target. Being a believer in Jesus Christ and in my Catholic faith, I would always make a sign of the cross in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, because there's always a reminder that I do this not just for myself, but I also do for God. And once I lock in on that, it's so fun. And then I'm able to swing freely, and then I kind of black out after that.
Let's move to the NFL a little bit. One of the things we see, and I guess it happens in the lower levels too, but directional kickoffs have become a a valuable tool. I would say they're valuable for some teams these days. Was that something you ever worked on, pooch kicks, those type things, or did you just bust the ball?
Yes, sir. So at Rice, I was getting my master's in statistics, and gosh, was that a hard program. It was one of the most difficult things I ever had to do. And Coach David Bailiff allowed me to coach after my career had finished, after we'd won the Hawaii Bowl. And what Coach asked me to do was go up there and chart the kicks. And what I found was, from a punting perspective, I'll talk about punting and directional real quick, is that in 2015, punting the ball on a direction, the correct direction, listen to this is a wild stat, actually contributed 10 yards to the net punt. So what does that actually mean? That means that it eliminated 10 yards on average from the return. Fascinating, right?
Yeah.
It's such an important part of the game that I statistically proved that we must kick the ball in these certain areas. And if we do, it literally adds 10 yards to the net punt. Otherwise, you can also say it made it 10 yards farther for the opposing offense to take over, right? It increases your defensive field position. For kickoffs, it's a little bit different, right? They've moved up the kick and they've tried to make it a little bit more kick it out of the back of the end zone and just fair catch it. However, for those returns, it actually ended up being a 5-yard improvement, right? And in high school, I cannot tell you more and emphasize more that it's better to hit the ball to the 10-yard line with a nice high kick right on the numbers than it is a kick that goes 1 or 2 yards in the end zone that's like that laser that everyone gets all excited about. The truth of the matter is that you want the defense to take over with as much green grass behind it as possible. So you bring up an incredible point there. Directional kicking is overlooked and underappreciated and undervalued.
Quickly, one question. You talked about moving the kickoff point. The NFL's done some tinkering the last few years. Do you think the kickoffs in particular, but do you think the kicking game ever goes away in the pro level?
Well, if it does, I'm gonna have to file for unemployment. We talked about this. Thomas McGay, he talked about this in 2012 when they moved the field or the kickoff position from the 30 to 35. That's actually the reason why I'm not in the NFL right now, because I was a specialist by being able to put the ball in the end zone from the 30. So I think they will continue to diminish kicking, at least the kickoff, because they're going to have to do it because of the concussion. So the short answer is yes, it will be diminished and continue to be so.
As we begin to wrap up, I want to go back to the technology side for a minute and look to the future. We know your app helps track results, but that requires a manual input. I understand you may be working on some technology, maybe chips in footballs that would, track that automatically. Tell us about that.
Right. So there's 3 different options. You can manually track it. You can track it through a video tracking software like we see in golf, or you can do the ball trackers with the chips. And I'll talk about the second of the 3 options. Since the football is brown, it makes it more difficult to track it on a phone. So it's actually more accurate if you have a player who is, yes, manually videoing and then manually putting in that information. The ball tracker is going to be very interesting because it's already tried out in the NFL, and they're not doing anything with field goal kicking. Well, why is that? I don't know, because it's misunderstood. So I'm currently developing the ball trackers for field goals and punts, and it's going to be able to track the trajectory of the ball and create essentially a wireless network that is more accurate than GPS, and it's a really cool system. So I'm looking to drop that here in the next 12 to 14 months.
You mentioned earlier that you got your start out of soccer. Is that where most kickers today start, is in soccer?
I would think so. Most kickers are, they played soccer growing up, and then they make a transition to kicking or football. The reason why that's important is that there's a natural ability to kick something. And it seems like most kids are starting in youth sports and soccer anyway. Odell Beckham Jr., one of my teammates, was a fantastic soccer player. And the footwork that these kids are developing at 4 or 5 years old really transcends into all these other sports. But for the most part, every kicker that I've come around has played soccer. However, the Australians played either rugby or the Aussie rules football, which made them different, but that's a whole nother discussion.
Well, we'll end it by putting you on the spot a little bit. Tell us, in your opinion, who's the best kicker in the game today? Pro, college, either one?
Yeah, so I would say in pro, Justin Tucker is probably the best veteran because of he's just repeatedly shown that he can, kick in tough moments, in clutch moments. I would say that the best young kicker is either Jake Elliott or Hairston Butker. Hairston Butker is a very, very interesting kicker. I recommend guys and youngsters following his career because he kicks the ball with such power, and the way that he's able to do it in that technical form is really amazing. And Jake's super smooth. I think those three guys are my favorites from the veterans and the young guys. And I think in college, it changes year to year because your snapper and your holder can change so much. But I was very impressed with the Memphis kicker, and I watched him against Penn State in the Cotton Bowl here in Dallas. Highly, highly impressive what he did by making those 5 kicks in the Cotton Bowl game. So he's a guy I would definitely look out for, University of Memphis kicker.
Well, James, if someone's interested in learning more about your products, how could somebody reach out to you?
Well, yeah, I recommend reaching out to me by looking at my website. And after looking at the material or downloading the app and playing with it, if you determine that it makes sense to have a conversation with me, great. I'm glad to have it. And you can reach out to me through my website, or you can call me. My information should be there on the website or Instagram or Twitter. But before reaching out to me, I want people to really figure, if it's something that they may be interested in first, and then decide to call me.
Great. Well, thanks for taking the time to join us. Hopefully we can have you on Sports One, maybe giving us some kicking and punting and long snapping tips and have some content from you in the future. So we're looking forward to that down the road.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me on. And excellent work with what you're doing. You are first class. Of all the coaches I've spoken with and organizations, this is first class, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Well, thanks. That's very nice of you to say. That'll do it for this edition of the Performance Lab, powered by Sports One. Thanks for joining us. I'm Bill Webb.